Your little athletes have big goals. Marana Pee Wee Soccer registration is now open for kids ages 3 through 6. Visit maranaz.gov/recreation to sign up now. Uniform t-shirt is included. Join in the fun.
Typically our supervisor's goal, is to have us respond to something within a half an hour.
From road debris and potholes to water leaks, the town of Marana is on it. Don't let a problem go unnoticed. Download the My Marana app for Android or Apple phones and do good today.
Welcome to Real Talk with the Town, where I sit down with the Marana staff to answer your burning questions about our beautiful community. My name is Terry Rozema, and I'm the town manager for the town, so let's get started. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Real Talk with the Town. My name is Terry, and I am your host, and today I am joined by a couple of town employees here. We have a returning guest, our Director of Public Works, Fausto Burruel, and also Mac Murray, a first-time appearance on the show. Gentlemen, why don't you go ahead and say hello to our listeners?
Hello, everybody. Fausto Burruel here.
Hello, my name is Mac Murray, Project Manager with the Town of Marana.
Thanks, Mac. So we're here to talk a little bit about the roads here in town. We got a couple of comments, questions from members of our community, residents here, a little bit concerned about what's being placed on the road and how it's being preserved. And so we're going to answer all those questions today. But before we get to this, this can be one of those things that, when you're doing a podcast or you're appearing in some sort of media type of thing, it can be a little bit intimidating. And we were talking about that before the show, and I found out something about Mac. Mac wasn't, he was like, I don't know about this. But Mac, you ever had any experience with this?
Well, I have. I'm not a real good media person. I did take our town media course. I didn't do that well on that. But.
Yeah, so we had a town media course. Vic Hathaway put that on. We had members of the media come out and provide, what was it, 2 days of instruction? 2 days of instruction. Mac, tell me, what kind of grade did you get in that class?
I think I must have got a D.
A D?
A D.
A D. But you passed, man.
I passed.
You passed. All right,
All
right, well, we're going to put that D to the test here today.
That's all right.
We're going to see how things go.
Let's see if I improve.
So you're already off to a great start. My goodness, man. You're making me laugh, so that's good. So the question, like the main header says, why are the roads in Marana so bumpy? I personally haven't experienced that, so we want to make sure that we respond to these questions. I'm not going to read these in their entirety, I don't think, because they're pretty long. This first one says, there seems to be a new paving trend with the roads in Marana that involves a coat of oil covered in small rocks. What are the reasons for this change in pavement technique? So there's one thing. Has there been a change? This is a technique that's being used. Is it a change? Is there any data on its impact on road noise, tire wear, windshield, rock chips? Subjectively, all three of these will seem to be worse. As a driver and runner on the recently repaved Continental Reserve Loop, I can say this method does not even generate a smooth, level surface on which to drive or run. Are there cost savings with this technique, or is it more durable than traditional paving? So that's the first one. And the second one is, why are the new repaved roads so bumpy and rocky? They aren't smooth like they used to be. I'm talking about the Lon Adams pavement that was done this week. The cracks weren't properly filled, and they're already cracking this new slurry. Are all the town streets going to be repaved like this, even the Dove Mountain area? This is hard on our car tires. The rocks go flying by cars driving by and hitting people walking on the sidewalks. That sounds horrific. Horrific, not terrific. So, Mac, let's talk a little bit about pavement and pavement preservation. You're kind of our guy when it comes to pavement preservation. Is that correct?
That's correct. I've been running the pavement preservation program with the town now for about 17 years. So I've been doing it for quite a while here. And the roadway infrastructure in Marana is very important to us, and we try and maintain our infrastructure at a high quality. And when we rate our roads, and the way we rate them is we take a a measurement vehicle, and we drive through all of our roadways, and that gives us a score. We then take that score and put that into data analytics in a computer system, which kind of spits out an idea of how we should maintain our roadway infrastructure.
So this is science.
Yes.
This isn't like putting a thumb in the air and going, it looks okay to me.
No, the reason why we do that is we want to make sure that when we repair the roads, we're doing the right treatment at the right time on the right road. And so in the past, when you did it by just driving around and taking a look at it, you can miss roads, or you can misanalyze a road. And so the computer system helps just to kind of take the human element out of it. It's more scientific. However, we still need to, once we get that data from our program, we still have to review that information. So there is still a hands-on component to it. But when we collect that data, our van that we use, it sends out, it's similar to LiDAR.
Is this our own van? I mean, this is our own, or is this something we rent? Is this a company that we have that comes in and does this analysis for us? How do we do that?
So once every 5 years, we procure a company that comes through and analyzes our road. It can be done by hand, but it's so much faster to do it with the electronics. And we're measuring the amount of cracks, the severity of the roadway deterioration. And when all of that goes in through our algorithms, we get a score. And with that score, we determine that the score is how we determine what type of treatment is put on the roadways. So we'd like to have everything at a high score.
So what's a high score? Like, I mean, you got a D in your media class. Is it A, B, C, D? Is it 1 to 10? Is it 1 to 100? What does that look like?
See, even though I'm a D at public speaking, we don't want Ds on a roadway.
No, bad grade.
So we have a 0 to 100 is what they spit out on a roadway analysis.
So what's a good grade for a road?
So typically we'd like to see good would be a 70 and above. A moderate would be, a 50 to a 70, and anything below that we're going to consider to be in a failing condition.
Okay.
And so what we're looking at is when each of these roadway segments get this rating, that's how we determine how we're going to treat that road. And we're looking to maximize the dollar value for our citizens. And so we're going to treat the best roads first. And so what that allows us to do is to keep most of our infrastructure in the best condition possible. And then as we take up those lower roads into a good condition, then we want to maintain that for as long as possible.
So let me ask you this, Mac. You said you've been doing the pavement preservation program for 17 years, right? And how long have we had the program itself?
So we've had
before you even started?
No.
Okay.
So this came along when I started. We didn't get into the data analytics till about 7 or 8 years after I started. So when we first started, we were hand grading the roads. It was very labor intensive. We were able to do a rudimentary version of what we do today.
Okay.
But with the van that's analyzing the road in the computer system, where it's a lot more accurate. And then the other thing we can do is we can also analyze roadway trends. When we put a roadway treatment down, we can then come back and say this treatment definitely improved the roadway condition.
Okay.
So I guess before we jump right into the questions that we have at hand, when we put a new pavement down, an average design life for an asphalt road is about 20 years.
So you lay it fresh.
So
if you lay a brand new road, you grade it, put the gravel down, the what do you call it, foundation, or what do you call it?
The base course.
The base course. You put the base course down, and then you put this brand new layer of blacktop, man. People just love driving on that brand new layer of blacktop. That should last 20 years.
Yes, if you do absolutely nothing to that road, we're looking at about 20 years before you have to do a massive reconstruction.
Okay. We don't do that, though.
Well, we don't want to do that.
Right. Okay.
So what we want to do is before the roadway gets in a bad condition, we want to come in and spend a little bit of money to put a surface coat of oil on there.
Okay.
And what that's going to do is it's similar to a coat of paint on a house.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't come in there and put a thick layer, but we want to do multiple thin layers. And it's kind of like putting sunscreen on the road. As you see, when the pavement ages, it starts to gray out. We're trying to get in there and preserve that. So as the roadway degrades, we'll put on a coat of oil. That oil will take our roadway rating back up. And then after 4 or 5 years, the roadways will start to deteriorate. And we want to keep doing those applications to keep that roadway as high as possible.
Let me ask you this, Max. So you lay down the brand new asphalt. How long before you have to put down that layer, that sunscreen on the roadway?
So it's kind of a case-by-case situation. We're trying to get that first coat as soon as possible.
Okay.
We need to have a little bit of time between each application to make sure that that application adheres. So when we pave a road, we don't want to come right on top of it and put on another surface treatment. We want to let it age.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're going to put on a treatment, and we'll let it sit for 3 or 4 years, unless we determine there's some other cause, of some other mechanism of failure, something's deteriorating faster than we expect. But the goal for the town is to treat every road in our infrastructure network every 5 years.
Okay.
And so what we're doing is we're watching our degradation curves. We're watching our road network to figure out what treatment. And once the roadway falls down a notch, then we have to switch to a different treatment type. So our first treatments, the treatments when the roadway's in good condition, those are oils we spray down. We let that cure for several hours, and we can open that back up to traffic. Those are really cost effective. They're relatively inexpensive, and they do a great job of preserving the roads, and we want to keep all our infrastructure at that point.
Mm-hmm.
When we get down to what we call like a medium grade, the only way to repair that is to reestablish the surface. So that's where our chip seals come in. And
okay, so we're talking about 2 different treatments right now. We talked about the first one, which is like an oil treatment, like a sunscreen, laying down a layer of, is it slurry? Is that what it's called? Or is
it's
it
just a coat of oil. Yeah,
just a coat of oil.
just
Okay.
a coat of oil.
All right. And so once it gets past that medium grade where it's in the 50 to 70 range, is that the range that you're looking at where we have to do a chip seal?
Yeah, so that's where what we're seeing a lot more distress on the pavement. You're seeing a lot more cracks. You're seeing the surface texture starting to disintegrate.
Mm-hmm.
The roadway isn't as smooth anymore. And putting a coat of oil on the top is not going to restore that surface.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we come in with a chip seal. And what a chip seal is where we put down a layer of oil and we embed rock into that.
Okay.
And that adds a new wearing layer. And it also helps to reestablish the ride. It's not going to improve the ride quality, but it's also not going to deteriorate. So it's going to mimic the existing condition, but it's going to help preserve that road for another 7 to 10 years.
Okay, so hold that right there. Hold that thought right there, because we just had 2 comments from 2 different areas. One in the Continental Reserve, I guess Continental Reserve Loop, and Lon Adams. Those both received treatments as of late. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay, so the treatments that both of those 2 received, the Lon Adams and Continental Reserve Loop, is that the treatment that you're talking about right here?
That's correct.
Chip seal.
Both of those areas received a chip seal.
Okay, now they're saying they don't like it because they say it's bumpy and the rocks are flying up and it's not smooth. How do you respond to that?
So the reason why we chose a chip seal is because it's in that intermediate stage, and we needed to reestablish the driving surface. What we use a rubberized binder where we take car tires, we melt that into the oil, and that becomes our adhesion for the stone. And that helps to prevent reflection cracking. So as we put a new surface down, it's going to help to prevent the reflection of those cracks coming up to the surface. When it comes to the ride quality, so when we apply the chip seal for the first several months, it's going to be a rougher surface to drive on. And that's because as the chips come out of the trucks, it's jumbled up as it hits the binder. It's going to take about the first 3 or 4 months for those chips to settle back down to lock in. And it usually settles within the first thermal cycle. So
What's a thermal cycle?
So
that sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
Thermal cycle.
So we have, as you well know, it's very hot out today, but but we've got to go through the first summer heat, and that warms that binder up, and the stones are still moving around. And so it's going to take a first season of heat before all of those stones get laid back into place, and the car tires are going to knead that down to where it's a smoother surface. So
this gets better with time.
It will get better within the first year.
Okay.
And then within that first year, that's as good as we're going to get as far as smoothness goes.
Okay.
Then what we do is we typically will follow that up with what we'll call a fog coat, which is another oil. And what that oil does will help to hold the chips into position. It will fill in the tiny micro spaces in between the chips. And then it'll also improve the aesthetics as well.
Okay. So we're talking about a number of different applications here. Now let's talk cost for those applications. Because I got to believe that if you're going to tear up a road, if you got existing pavement and it's got cracks in it and it's just not what it needs to be per our standards, if you got to tear all that up and put down a brand new layer of asphalt, I got to imagine that's a pretty expensive project right there. Am I right?
That's correct. And that's why we want to delay the removal and replacement of the roadways as long as possible. We'd like to take that 20 years and move that out to 50 years if we can. So,
that's impressive. Now, what does that do for our residents here?
So what that allows us to do is to maintain more of our roadway infrastructure so that our overall network score, all of the roads in the town put together, is at the highest it possibly can. Mm-hmm. If we were to remove and replace every road every 20 years, we simply just couldn't afford that. And our overall network would be very, very low. So by coming and doing these intermediary treatments, we really are keeping that network high and giving the taxpayer the best bang for the buck. So if we were to come in and do a surface treatment, and oil costs around $1 to $2 a square yard. Our chip seals, which will give us another 7 years of pavement life, that runs about $5 a square yard for the type of chip that we utilize. We use a high-end chip seal, which gives us a lot of other added benefits with reflection cracking. If we were to come in and replace that roadway, that's going to be in the $20 to $25 range, if not higher, depending on if there's failures on the roadway base. So that's one of the reasons. Also, prior to any of these treatments going down, crack sealing is one of the most important things that we do, because the crack sealing helps to prevent the water from getting underneath the roadway.
We love water in the desert, but not on the roads going into the cracks of the roads, right?
That's correct.
It creates all kinds of problems.
Yeah, and surprisingly, even though we live in the desert and we don't get a whole lot of rain, once that water gets in between the cracks in the roadway surface, there's no way for it to escape. And it's constant, and it's building up over time. And so our roadway network does fall apart because of rain, and that crack seal is our number one way that we can stop that water from getting underneath the roadway and cracking or further deteriorating our structures.
Yeah.
Are you interested in a career in law enforcement or simply want to know more about policing? Attend the Marana Citizens Police Academy every spring and fall. This 13-week academy is taught by employees and officers and showcases several units within the department, including crime scene, canines, and SWAT. For more information, visit www.maranaaz.gov/MPD.
Do you have a need for speed? Whether you want to improve your race time or just have fun, the Run Marana series has something for everyone. Choose your challenge and sign up for one of the 5 races held throughout the year. Visit maranaaz.gov/run to sign up. Your speed, your run, your town.
Are you ready to accept the Dine and Discover Marana Local Summer Challenge? Support local food and beverage businesses, including restaurants, cafes, food trucks, and more. Track your trips on the challenge card and visit the Marana Visitors Center to earn exclusive Marana merch you'll be proud to wear. What better way to show community pride and support for local businesses? For more information, visit discovermarana.org. Challenge cards will be accepted through August or while supplies last. This program is brought to you by the Marana Chamber of Commerce in partnership with Discover Marana.
Well, this is very. You may have received a D in your media relations, but I'm going to give you an A+ so far in this podcast on your knowledge of pavement preservation. This is good stuff. So I want to talk a little bit about why this is so important. And you talked about cost because we've talked about this on the show before, the number of linear miles in the town, because we're 124 square miles here in the town of Marana. We got a lot of roads, a lot of streets, neighborhood streets, arterial streets, etc. So how many miles of pavement are you responsible for here, Mac?
So right now, the town has 637 lane miles of pavement that we maintain every year. So it's quite a bit of road that we have to take care of.
That's
every
like
year.
driving here to San Francisco or something. I'm not sure. It's a distance. That's a lot. That's a lot of pavement.
Yeah.
And so it sounds to me, based on what you're saying, that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that when we put down a new road, we're using all of the available techniques and products in order to extend the life of that road so that we end up spending less money on roadways. Is that accurate?
That's correct. And our pavement management system helps to make sure that we're putting the right treatment on the right road. Because if we
at the right time, sounds like.
At the right time as
Yeah.
well. Because we can spend a lot of money on treatments that won't work, and we're trying to avoid that, or making sure that the treatment we put on is the right one for that surface.
So, Fausto, you've been over there. You've been very quiet. I don't know if it's because you don't have anything to contribute or because Mac just has all the answers, but
Mac is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to pavement preservation.
he's the man. In 17 years of pavement preservation, he's got this stuff down.
He does.
Yeah.
And actually, before we move on, I had a question for Mac. I know some of the questions we receive are about, is this a new application? Have we been utilizing CHIP in the town? And if so, about how long?
So chip seal is an application that we've always used in the town, and it has always been in our toolbox. One of the reasons I think that there's a perception that we might be using it more is our roadway infrastructure is aging in many of the locations that people are now seeing this come back up.
Exactly.
So the town of Marana, compared to other jurisdictions, is a relatively new town, and our roadway infrastructure is high quality. But a lot of our neighborhoods now are getting to that 20-year mark, and those roadways are needing a little bit more help. And so if you've lived in these neighborhoods for 10 years and said, I've never seen this before, that's because we've been trying our best to keep that roadway condition in a good state, and it's now deteriorated to the point where we're going to need to have a slightly more aggressive treatment go down.
No, that's a great point, Mac. Some of the subdivisions mentioned, Cortero Ranch, Gladden, Cortero's a little bit older. Gladden's about at that 20-year time frame. So, yeah, that's a good point. And I just wanted to ensure everybody knows that we have been utilizing these type of treatments. They are very good. They are very economical, but also, as Mac mentioned, they do a really good job of preserving the roadways.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. The techniques that we use here, are those pretty standard across the United States? Are there other techniques that are used in other parts of the country? Any thoughts on that?
There are different variations of the techniques we use. They are standard. You will see that some agencies utilize a certain treatment more than others. And again, this is another one I'll have to defer to Matt because he's more up to speed. He's very knowledgeable in all these different treatment types and where they're used. But I think within the region, we aren't an outlier for sure. Some of our other agencies utilize similar treatments.
Yeah, when it comes to this area, we try in Marana, we try to utilize as many different types of treatments as possible to make sure that we're doing the right treatment on the roadway. As far as the types of treatments, they're all pretty similar across the United States. What differs is more on the technical end, since we don't have cold weather. The types of oil that we use is different. So the oil that I would put on a road in Tucson is not the same that you'd put on in Michigan because of the temperatures.
Oh, Michigan, go blue.
I know. Look
You
at
did that on purpose.
Oh, well done, Mac.
I know. That was a 1 in 50 chance.
There you go. Good job, Mac.
But
Hey,
then we also, other parts of the country have a lot of concrete, and we don't have concrete. So I mean, we're slightly different because of our thermal cycles here. It's so intense in the summer, but the basics of roadway preservation is the same no matter where you go.
No, great point. And one thing, Mac, that we didn't mention, I want to make sure we point out that the type of chip we utilize for our chip seals, being a rubberized coated chip.
Yeah. So there's several types of chip that can be done. A standard chip uses a regular oil with crushed rock in it. What we specify in the town of Marana is a rubberized binder, or the glue that holds the rock together and to the existing roadway surface. And what that rubber does is that we utilize the elastic properties of the rubber tires, and that prevents reflection cracking from coming up. It also allows the roadway to move around. It has the added benefit rubber does. It's usually quieter. In a chip seal, that doesn't come to the surface as much. There was a question about tire noise, and we can get to that in a second. But that rubber is a superior binder, and it really, really aids in the longevity of the chip seal. So a standard emulsion might get us 3 or 4 years, and we found that this chip gives us an additional 3 or so, or possibly more years of life. So we think it's a good investment.
So now, with pavement preservation, this isn't something that we just do occasionally. It's something we have a yearly program, a pavement preservation program. And every year, we have money in the budget to address roads based on it. Every year, you guys, you're looking every 5 years, you're looking at what's going to need treatment when, and you're putting that into the budget based on this cycle and making sure that we have the right treatment at the right time, right? So all of those things. So talk a little bit about, if either one of you, whether it's Fausto or Mac, can talk about how much money we're spending to preserve the roads and ensure that we don't get a lot of potholes and, really crummy roads to drive on.
Well, so if you don't mind, Mac, I'll start and then you can jump in. So our pavement preservation program, we have 1.5 million currently identified for that. And if you look, that number actually isn't very high for the amount of work we do. But some of the things we have done is we've also had some CIP programmatic treatments of the roadways over the years, where we've done some of these larger roadways, and we've established some of we call it more of a rehab treatment, but we did utilize chip in those instances. But again, so that $1.5 million is what we utilize for our 5-year program to establish how much we're going to put towards our
And
roads.
that's roughly $1.5 million a year.
Roughly
for that.
$1.5 million a year. But as part of that too, we've something we've instituted several years ago is we put the first treatment, as Mac mentioned. We like to get on a brand new roadway and apply that oil, which is typically called the fog seal in general, as early as possible. So we put the onus on our developer or the development community. Was when they build a subdivision and they hand over the roadway to us, there's one of two things that happen. They either perform that initial treatment, so they put a fog seal, that oil treatment, as Mac mentioned, on the roadway, or they pay us in lieu fees. So they give us money, and then we take that money and we put it into our pavement preservation program. And so the coming fiscal year, we will identify those roadways and add them to that year's pavement preservation.
Okay, very good. Anything to add on top of that, Mac?
No, we utilize on our pavement preservation at 1.5. That's what we're utilizing for our good roads and our intermediate roads, and we use our capital improvement projects to do those roads that were kind of deemed as unacceptable, and those are coming out of a different funding mechanism.
Okay. So I think that we've answered most of the questions. It says that one of the people contends that it's bumpy. It shouldn't be bumpy, right? I mean, it's if the road is smooth and we're applying a chip seal, it pretty much accepts whatever undulations might be in the road, right?
Right. So a chip seal doesn't change the ride quality; it mimics it. So as you lay the stone down, it's going to fall plus or minus in the same imperfections on the base. You'll have a slight improvement in ride quality, but again, for that first 3 months, it's going to be noticeably different. It will be a little noisier. It will be a little bumpier because those chips, the rock particles, are still moving around.
Okay. Now, we've talked about this one before, and somebody brought this up the other day to me, Avra Valley Road. Now, that one is getting a complete is it called an overlay on that one? What are we doing to Avra Valley?
So on our Avra Valley, we're just getting ready to put that out to bid, and we're going to put a new surface down, a new overlay. So we're going to come in and we're going to put two additional inches of asphalt down, and the surface will be as it was prior to the milling operation that we had.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So we talked about the fog seal. We talked about chip seal. We talked about overlay. Is there any other out there? Mill and fill. Is that something different than any of the ones we've talked about so far?
So a mill and fill is when we have to completely replace a roadway. When a roadway has failed, there's numerous mechanisms of failure. But we will come in, and milling is a term that we use for the machine to come in and to remove the existing asphalt, and that takes it down to our base. The fill is where we come back and we'll put new asphalt in.
So that's a brand new road. Then.
It's a mill and fill is essentially a brand new road.
Okay.
And there's different grades of mill and fill depending on the road, whether the sub base, the soil underneath the roadway needs to be repaired or not. So it's not always as simple as take off the old and put on the new. But that is the most expensive treatment, and we're trying to give the pavement as much life as possible before we do that.
There are instances where you could, if it's a larger roadway, thicker asphalt, and there's no underlying issues, as Mac mentioned, you can mill off a top layer of it and then repave. So there's different levels of mill and fill. But yeah, we do our best to ensure our roads don't get to that point where we have to reconstruct or even go down to the base. Because once you're getting down to that level, yeah, you're talking about reconstructing a roadway, and obviously your price point has gone up substantially.
All right. Well, hopefully both of the listeners who wrote in one about Lon Adams and the other about Continental Reserve Loop, hopefully they're already beginning to see some of that smoothing out and some of the gravel, the fill kind of smoothing out so that the road is a little bit nicer for them and not so noisy. But that kind of concludes the questions that I have for you guys. Is there anything that you want to make sure that you add that you think our listeners really need to be aware of?
Well, I know Mac's thinking about it. He's probably coming up with some really good technical response. I just want to ensure our listeners know that we are doing the best stewards we can of our funding and obviously the taxpayers' money, and we're utilizing those funds in the best way possible. That's why we do this pavement preservation program. That's why we establish a 5-year. That is why we are actually this year going to assess our roadways again with the van, as was discussed in the beginning of the podcast. And we're going to get an idea as how good of a job we did the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So what that does, it tells us, okay, is our roadway network still as good as we think it is? And then a lot of those degradation curves, a lot of those criteria and the algorithm that was established, was it correct? And every time you do that, you get a little bit tighter, you get a little bit better as far as your analysis. We are now in the second time of utilizing this type of in-depth analysis using this technology. So this time it'll tell us how close we are, and then hopefully we'll continue to improve, which is what we, always want to do.
Well, I love doing these podcasts because I always learn things. Today I learned about thermal cycles and algorithms, and you guys are very technical here, man. I like that. Sounds smart.
We try.
Yeah, we try. Hey, so you heard Fausto, this is for you, but you heard Mac talk earlier how he got a D in his media class here with the town, but I thought he had an A+ performance here today. I want to hear from you, one of his bosses here. What are your thoughts? How does Mac Murray perform day in and day out for the town?
We've always played, whether it be golf, whether it play pool, a shark, a sandbagger, you name it.
Uh-huh.
Mac, he's been in front of the camera before, and he's pretty polished, and I think that D is he was lowballing there.
He's lowballing me.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, he did a great job.
I was going to say, he did very well. So, anything you want to say in closing, Mac?
So just a recap, just so that our citizens are kind of up to speed to what to expect when they're driving on the roadway. The first thing that we do is do crack sealing. So once we do a crack seal, you may be driving around the roads, and that's when you see those kind of black spaghetti lines all over the place. Mm-hmm. That's the product that we use to keep the water from penetrating into the road. And when we put that down, it may look less than appeasing, but that's our primary defense for the roadway. When we put that treatment down, we want to let that sit. We want to let it cure for a year before we do anything to that roadway. If we put another treatment on there too soon, that product can bleed up. And then when we put a new treatment on, then you can see those spider webs coming up into our new treatment. So it's important for us to...
You know what? I always wondered about that, Mac.
Yeah.
And you just answered that question. Serious as a heart attack, man. I always wondered, why do we do that? And why don't we just put another coat over the top of it and make it look pretty again? But you just answered that. It totally makes sense.
Yeah, so we have a lot of problems with adhesion, with two dissimilar materials coming together. If our compounds, the compounds that we put in to keep those cracks, to prevent the water from going in, they're designed to be flexible. So as we get to our thermal cycle, as the roadway grows and shrinks, we need a material that can move with the roadway. But those same properties that make it flexible, if we were to put on another hot asphalt onto the top of it, it would kind of drool up into the new layer. So I just like to let our citizens know that what to expect, and that we use a layer theory when we apply our treatments onto the road. We got to put a treatment down, then we have to wait for a cycle. Put another treatment down, then we got to wait for a cycle. And if we put too much oil on, we can have too much of a good thing, and we can actually damage our roadway infrastructure. And so pavement preservation, it's a process that takes some time. And we're certainly on top of it. We want to make sure that we do the right treatment, but that's why sometimes it appears that we have periods where we're not doing anything, because we're waiting for our products to cure. And if anyone does have any questions, or this brings up questions that somebody hasn't asked, they can feel free to contact the town, and I'll be happy to answer any further questions that anybody has.
Well, there you go, folks. You talked here today with our Director of Public Works, Fausto Burruel, and I'm going to call him Dr. Mac Murray because I think he has a PhD in pavement preservationology. I don't even know if that's a thing. I'm sure it's not a thing, actually. But, Mac, I want to thank you for joining us here today. You always do such a wonderful job for the town, and appreciate you paying such close attention to this very important thing. Those are one of the things that I think that people really focus on is quality of roads. And when roads are not good, we hear about it. And I think the town does just a fantastic job of ensuring that our roads stay at the very highest quality that they can, and that we try to get as much out of them as we can to save our taxpayers money. So thank you both for joining us today, and thank you listeners for listening. Until next time. Submit your questions by visiting maranaaz.gov/realtalk, and we'll answer them right here. To receive notifications for new releases, remember to click subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Also, please follow the town on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay up to date on current news and events.